How are we doing? I hope you guys are having an awesome Wednesday. That haircut, it really wakes you up. Sorry, it's going between two different monitors, two different cameras here. So hopefully you are awake, you are alert, you are alive, and you are enthusiastic today. I know that music that comes up, it really gets me pumped for these conversations. So today we have an awesome opportunity. Today is the day that this camera starts hitting store shelves, and this is the Panasonic S5. First and foremost, I am super jealous that my friend Todd here has got to shoot with this camera for the last month or two, and that's why I wanted to bring him on here, because he's had first-hand experience with this camera. I'm super excited to talk to him, so let's go ahead and bring him into the old broadcast. How are we doing today, buddy?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am living the dream. I love your set there. That's pretty awesome. You got the accent light in the back. You got the cacti there, looking clean.
Yeah, thanks.
Clean.
So it's kind of fun, you know. I've already been out this morning and knocked out a photo shoot for some products, and then rushed back to the house to hop on here and fixing to head back out to shoot whenever we're done. So life is busy and hopping.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit, for people that don't know who you are, share with us a little bit about, who is Todd White? What type of stuff do you shoot? And how did you, start working with Lumix?
Sure. So my name's Todd White, and I'm a Lumix Ambassador. And so I am a fashion and commercial photographer. I've been actually shooting since about the 80s and grew up on shooting film, and still shoot film to this day and love it, but obviously also shoot digital as well. And so there's a couple of different things that I focus on. Fashion and commercial work, both doing photo and video. And then I'm also the producer and shoot some video with a TV show on PBS. It's called The Day Tripper, the Texas travel show. And so I've been with that show for about 7 seasons now. And then in reference to working with Lumix, I'd say about a year or so, year and a half ago, they reached out to me and asked me if I'd be interested in checking out the S1R before it was released, and put that camera in my hands and fell in love with it, and really have enjoyed the system since then, for sure.
Absolutely. So I noticed on your website it says stills in motion. So what, why for that? I mean, it looks like you do both photo and video.
Correct.
What do you do more of? I feel like that's a really good fit for the Lumix cameras. I mean, they're great hybrid cameras. So what type of stills do you do versus the video? I mean, do you see yourself doing a lot more video recently, or?
It's probably, for me, is about half and half. Most of my clients that come to me hire me because they want both. So I will walk into a boutique, or whether it's a fashion designer. So I've got a couple of designers that I work with that are off of Project Runway. And when they come to me, they want the whole package. It's like, let's get still shots of the collection and let's shoot a video to go with it as well. Or last night I was down in Austin shooting for a local boutique. We were doing a fall lookbook, which included both stills of fall outfits and then also a video as well that we can post for Instagram, Facebook, and whatever that might be. So I do both.
Excellent. Excellent. So let's jump into the S5. So first, what are your first thoughts on this? What comes to mind when you first got your hands on this camera?
I love the size. In fact, I've got mine right here. I love the size of this camera. I think it's fantastic. And there were some times, based on what I was doing and with my client work and where I'm shooting, that to get what I wanted from video and also to remain a little bit inconspicuous with what I was doing, sort of running the streets of Austin, shooting fashion and so on, I just wanted something smaller. And that was the first thing when I got this camera and put it in my hands. And I was just like, wow, this feels right. It feels good. And I love the fact that I can go out and I can shoot stills and video with this. And I'm going to get stills that are the quality of the S1. And I'm going to get video that's right up there with the S1H. And so I love this all-in-one package for me.
Excellent. So there's a lot of cameras that are on the market that do great stills and video. So why would someone choose the S5 over, other brands? Like, what sets it apart?
For me, I love 24 megapixels, great in low light. The image quality is fantastic. The color science in this camera is amazing. That's one of the things I noticed when I first started shooting with Lumix, just from a perspective of color and with stills. They were just great to work with. I really enjoyed shooting this camera and just the S series in general and the color science. But then as far as the video is concerned with this camera, I mean, 422 10-bit is just wonderful to work with and to grade. I used to be afraid of shooting in log, and now for me, I shoot everything in Vlog, and it just makes sense. It's almost easier for me to work with Vlog than it is to shoot in like a flat or standard profile in this camera. Like you mentioned about doing more video, for me, just the video capabilities of this camera, the S1H, the S1, they're all just great and fantastic. And I just love the image that comes out of them, for sure.
Absolutely. And for people that don't know, so you said two key terms there. And Frala, I see your question. I'll get that in one moment. So 422 and log format. So can you help us understand, like, what exactly does that mean?
So 422 is going to be just the amount of colors and how accurate the colors are in the rendition whenever it's being recorded, and then how much color and true color and saturation you have to work with in post-production. So you usually see like 420, 422, 444, and it just really goes on when you're, and this gets more technical than what I'm going to go in here, but when you're looking at bands of color, it's how often those get repeated versus each block is the accurate color versus repeating what's next to it, whether it repeats it every line or every 2 or every 4, it just depends. And so, but it's all about color accuracy when you're talking about 422 color. And then on the 10-bit side, obviously, more color to work with as opposed to an 8-bit image that's coming out. And then log. So log really is just a flat profile that you can shoot video in. It's kind of like RAW in reference to your still images, but it's like RAW for video, if you will. Not confused with the RAW format, which is uncompressed, but just that way it looks. And it comes out looking pretty gray, and you've got a lot of room to play with in dynamic range to pull up shadows and bring back the highlights and work with the color.
Excellent. And we did have a question that came in. Do you have any tips for exposing for Vlog or a log format in general?
So you hear different thoughts on this. For me, whenever I'm shooting with log, I will expose not fully to the right. I'll kind of go to the right and then pull back. So just when I start to see the zebras hit the highlights, I'll pull back a little bit, because I know that I can work with that and I can bring that back. And that's the beauty of having, the dynamic range and having 14 stops to work with, is I can go and I can massage that image in post-production. So I go just to get the highlights, and then I pull back.
Okay. And then is that the same for Vlog as well? A question came in, what is your technique to nail your exposure for video, just kind of overall? Like, what are some of the tools that you use to do that?
So for me, for overall, I'm going to use, obviously, my histogram and camera, which is wonderful to have that right there on the screen that I can look at whenever I'm judging that. And then I'm also going to I keep my zebras on as well, but I keep those fairly high as far as the sensitivity, or low, I should say. So I have mine at like 95 and 100. So I really have to be pushing in before they'll start to show up. And for me, I always tend to underexpose a little bit on video, just because I know I've got the latitude to bring it back. Because, we all know, and same philosophy as in with shooting stills, that once you've blown it and you've gone to white, there's no data to recover, and so you're stuck. So I tend to underexpose a little bit.
Absolutely. We have a ton of exposure questions, so it looks like we struck a chord here. Have you had a chance to, I guess I'll go to this one next. Does that same go for like nighttime shots? You're still looking at those meters, whether it's the vector scope, the histogram, any of your monitors, you're watching that, right?
I am. And it's all about making decisions too. And we have to consider, and I probably should go back and clarify, I'm going to expose for my subject. So if I'm shooting a person and they're going to be backlit, like I'm shooting into the sun, I know I'm going to sacrifice that sky to some extent. I do have the range to bring it back, but I'm going to sacrifice it some. When you're shooting at night, so I did some night shooting recently for a review that I did with the local camera store here in Austin about the S5. And when I was shooting in the evening, I was shooting at 4,000, and I look at the street lights, and those I know I'm going to sacrifice. There's just no way around that. But then I just start to look at balancing out the rest of the light that's sitting in the scene itself. And I'm gonna blow the street lights. There's just no way around it. So then I start looking at what's important. The buildings, if I'm shooting a person, how are they lit? It's all about decisions, and you're gonna make some sacrifices somewhere.
Absolutely. And have you had a chance to play with, and I guess does the S5, I'm pretty sure it does, but any of the HLG or the hybrid log gamma stuff? Have you jumped into that at
I've
all?
not played with that much. That's
But
one area that I've not really delved into.
But I would assume with that you would follow kind of that same methodology for exposing for
You would.
HLG.
You would.
Absolutely.
Yep, absolutely.
Now, when you're setting up your exposure for your videos, is there a certain
Mhm.
metering mode that you're using for that?
I personally am using spot metering, but a lot of me is just looking at the screen and looking at the image as a whole. And once again, going back into looking at my main subject, but I'm always running in spot metering. That's just my way of
Your
shooting.
style? Sure, absolutely. Have you noticed any more noise with Vlog? And if so, like, do you have any tips for that? And I feel like this is a good point to talk about dual native ISO as
Yeah,
well.
my mind just went right to that spot. So have I noticed more noise? No, I really haven't. When I'm outside of the dual native ISO range, I really haven't noticed um, any noise issues. And I will say that it's nothing that I can't fix in post. That's not obviously the goal, but still you have to make those choices. But it's not anything that I find to be unacceptable. And when you think about when you're shooting with dual native ISO, for instance, when we're talking about dual native ISO in reference to log and vlog, that is going to be at 640 and 4,000. So when you're shooting in vlog on these cameras, your base, your floor ISO becomes 640. And that's going to be your cleanest image at that point. And then I can roll through, and you'll start to see a little bit of noise get introduced as you start creeping into 16, 3200. But when you hit that 4,000, then it cleans up and looks like you're back at 640. Because basically you've transferred that over, and you're working on a new circuit, a different circuit. And so technically, when I hit 4,000 and then I start moving above that into like 6,400, it's almost like I've gone at 640 and moving into 800. It's kind of that equivalent because I've reset, if you will.
Absolutely. And that was the one thing that I noticed because I was there for the GH5S launch. And it was the first time we kind of started, introducing consumers to dual native ISO. And it was crazy once you hit that second circuit, like just how clean the files are. And that's something that I feel like you definitely want to, if you can get your hands on this camera. We're doing a touch and try this Friday. So anybody for our local audience, we have this camera here and you can do some tests with it. But that dual native ISO is just such a powerful tool, I feel like, for filmmakers. And
it is.
And
It's
also
amazing.
still shooters. I mean, Mark Toll had shared a photo not too long ago on the S1 group, and the ISO was super high, and he mentions, he's like, I'm not afraid of that. Like, I'll bump it up to f8 because I want more things, in focus, and I need my shutter speed to be at this level, and I don't worry about the noise because they are such clean files coming out of this camera.
They really are. And I'll mention this about the still photography, that it's not talked about a lot, but there is a dual native ISO component to the still photography as well. So that's at 100 and 640. Those are your dual native points when you're doing still photography also. So, and those ranges change too. So for instance, in the photography, they stay at the 100 and 640, but then when you're doing video, then what happens with that is in the vlog, it's sitting at 640 and 4,000. But if I shoot an HLG, I believe it's 400 and 2,500. And then I want to say it's 116 for standard. I could be wrong on that one, but I know the HLG 4 and 25, and then 640 and 4,000 for vlog.
That's awesome. So what are some of the things that you've like I know you mentioned size, but
Mhm.
like how does this compare? Someone has in the chat file out and it looks like they're pre-ordering. So awesome. Give us a call.
Awesome.
They have the S1 now and they're thinking about pre-ordering the S5. And this is a
Okay.
question that we've been getting quite a bit. So, why would you choose one or the other? Having you shot both the S1R
Mhm.
and now this, why would someone choose one or the other?
So a lot of it's going to be on size, but also this camera, if this is important to you, this camera brings back a flip out screen. And that's fantastic, which you don't get with the S1. So now I've got a fully articulating screen on this camera that I can work with. This is fantastic. So that's a really big deal. I also like the placement. This feels more like a mini S1H. And so for the majority of my video work, I use the S1H. And so I love like the placement of the record button that's on top. I've got dual SD card slots, which I love as well. And once again, this just, like I said, it feels like a mini S1H. And that's, for me, a big key thing. Now, one of the things that this camera doesn't have that the S1 has is that this doesn't have the, I believe it's my mind just went completely blank. Is that allowed to happen on a live stream for your mind to go
Absolutely. No, this is raw.
blank?
This is coming right for you. It's all good.
That's great. Some of these things I should know off the top of my head, and then I just realized I did not have my brain set for this one question.
It's all good.
And I'm going to
And
check
also, I mean, the
thing
biggest thing
real
too
fast.
is, on this, you aren't going to have the little screen on the top. So if that's not a deal breaker for
True.
you, you can, the
Yep.
S5 is definitely a great option.
And what I was going to mention that you don't have with this camera is that you don't have all eye as far as the recording option. You've got long op. So this camera uses the long op versus the all eye, whereas your S1 has that. And then also your frames per second as far as your burst mode for still shooting is a little bit slower on the 5 than it is on the 1. Now, I don't shoot a lot of sports and such, so I don't need to have a crazy burst rate for frames per second. So I've not noticed it being an issue. I just know in the specs the numbers are different for that. But I've not been slowed down with anything that I do with it. But the S1 does have a higher burst rate for frames, so that's something that comes into play for sure for some people as well.
And also, I feel like a lot of people talk about, oh, the S1, it's a lot bigger than the S5, and they touted the S5 being so much smaller. But at the end of the day, it's all about what's comfortable to you. I feel like, to me, when I was there, like the S1 felt comfortable. I liked that bigger handle. I had always put a grip on my G9, my GH5. So it's all about your preference on size too. Some people don't want a tiny body. Others do. So I feel like, get into your local camera store and, get your hands on this. So that way you can feel what's most comfortable for you. So,
and one of the big things that this camera is touted for is just really being a really great, well-rounded camera for the content creator. And that's just a big thing for me. So like, for instance, just to give you an idea of application, yesterday I was out shooting and I was shooting for a local boutique, and I chose to use a combination of the S1R and I used the S1H for that job. I wanted those larger files that I could work with because some of that stuff's going to go to print and it's going to go to larger displays and things. So I wanted to have that ability to punch in and mess with that image more that the S1R will give me. And then I chose the S1H for the video just because I had it caged up and it was rigged up just like I like it with my wooden handle from Small Rig and all. And it just works well for me. However, the other day, I was shooting in San Antonio with a blogger, and we were doing more of a run and gun style shooting. And so all I took with me was my S5. I dropped on the 24 to 72.8 S Pro lens, and we hit the ground running and got stills and photos. I mean, stills and video for her project. So it's all about the application and how you use the tool.
Absolutely. And then another thing, you had mentioned something, and this made me think about it, that, about not slowing you down. I noticed there's this new little thing on the mode dial. It's called S&Q. So what is that about? Tell us a little bit about that.
So the S&Q mode, it allows you to capture anywhere from 1 to 60 frames per second in 4K, and it will process that in camera, Or if you're shooting in 1080, then I can go from 1 to 180 frames per second. And it once again processes that image in camera and creates a movie file for you. And so it's just another way, another option for the there's a group of things I call the creative modes in this camera. And it's just one of those creative modes that you have access to. If you don't want to go back, take the footage, bring it into post-production, reinterpret that footage back to 24 to slow it down and so on, you can do all that in camera. And that's a really quick turnaround to put something right away on Instagram or Facebook or your social media of choice.
Absolutely, that's awesome. And then I played with that a little bit on the G100, and it was just nice just to have. It's like, could I do that in Premiere and Final Cut? And could I do it? Yeah, but it's going to take more time.
Sure.
This is just like right now, ready to roll, drop it in the timeline and rock it out.
Yeah, and the other thing you mentioned, the G100, on this camera as well, besides having the S&Q mode, I also have the frame sizes that I can put onto this. So now if I know I'm going to be shooting and I need content in 4x5, or pick whatever frame size you need, I can put frame markers on this camera, and now I can look and ensure that my content's going to fall within the frame that I need for the social media application that I'm using. And it also will spit out my files for me. So if I'm shooting video and I flip it over and I want to shoot vertical for Instagram, my files are going to come over already flipped for me. I don't have to go into post and rotate that in Premiere.
Absolutely. And now there's also a actually, man, questions are coming in, so I'll come back to my point. Would I lose any features specifically for video if I upgrade to an S5 from a GH5?
Would you lose anything? I believe the only thing, and I've not shot a lot with the GH5, but I think the one that comes to mind is, I believe, is that all-eye recording option, which is not the long.
Does it do anamorphic as well? I don't know that Josh shoots a lot of anamorphic, but does it do anamorphic D-squeeze?
It does. I've got anamorphic D-squeeze here, and I'm actually getting more anamorphic features coming into a firmware update that'll be coming toward the end of the year as well. Which, with that firmware update, we're also going to be introducing a ProRes out, like a RAW out, I should say, like we see on the S1H.
Awesome. So yeah, not really losing much. And the image stabilization, you feel, has been top notch. I mean, pretty good.
Yeah, I don't have any issues with it. For me, it's basically like I was shooting with my S1 or my S1H.
Love it. And then a question came in: does it autofocus in slow motion?
So it autofocuses in slow motion. If I'm doing in the S&Q mode, I can get it in at the 120, but if I go above the 120 to 180, I don't get it.
Okay, cool. And that's one thing too. There's so many. One thing that I love about Panasonic is there's so many features, and they put as much as they can into the cameras, and they're going to always be pushing the envelope. So with that, they're not just going to say, well, we can't do slow motion because we can't autofocus in every. They're going to give you absolutely everything they can, as long as it's going to produce a good quality, image or video. But we definitely recommend, either renting the camera to try it out, but checking out the spec sheets, because every codec, sometimes can have different features for what it can do and can't do.
Right.
So yeah, we definitely recommend checking that out. So with this camera, like, who would this be for? I know that's a pretty big question, but who do you feel like this camera is best fit for?
I mean, that's a big question, because I'll say for myself, for me, for my everyday run around camera for capturing a big majority of the content I need, I'm going to be reaching for the S5 now. I really will. It gives me everything that I need on the video side as well as the still side to get, I would say, probably 75% of the work that I have to get done. I can get that done with the S5 without even thinking twice about it. I really, really think that this camera is really geared towards, as it says, the content creator, and I think it's the hybrid shooter. That's where I'll say the hybrid shooter. For me, this will be used as, and I've already used it now once. I was working on a video project about 2 weeks ago, and it was a second camera, as a B camera for my S1H. just because I know it was going to match up just perfectly.
Absolutely. And now this also has the tally light with the screen, right? Did I read that right? Where it like does the red outline?
Correct. So,
When you're
so you have
recording?
your red frame. I don't have my tally light in the front like I've got with the S1H, but I do get the red frame on the back, which is fantastic. There's no question you're recording.
Yeah, and there's been so many times where I've done stuff, especially like for putting stuff together, and I forget to hit the record button. I think that is such a smart way to do that. And it was first introduced in the G100. And what it is there's like a red box all the way around. If you guys don't know, there's a red box around the screen, so that way you can visually see that it's recording. So instead of having like a little red light on the front, which is nice, this is boom right there on screen, and you can see that it's recording. So.
And a lot of times when I'm shooting, I tend to, especially when I'm doing my run and gun shooting with models, I tend to use a Gorilla Pod to hold on to, and I'm really doing a lot of handheld shots. And so I'm up to the eye with it. The more points of contact to the body, the more stable the image is going to be when you're filming. And so I'm moving a lot, and ever so often in using with a different camera, I would have to always try to look up in the corner to see if the red dot was there. Yep. So it's just nice to have the red frame everywhere for sure.
Absolutely. Question came in, how does it compare for autofocus? How has autofocus been in video for you? I've heard great things about the new kind of fine tuning they've done to the DFD autofocus. How has it been for you?
For me, it's been fantastic. I can definitely tell a difference with it between the S1H and the S1. I don't really use the S1R for video, though it can do it. I just don't really use it for that. But I definitely have noticed a change. In fact, we were doing a review video recently, and I love the fact that they've added head in here now. So you've got your face, your eye, body, and now head tracking as well. So we had a model that we were tracking her from the front and was tracking her face and her eye. She turned around, caught the head, and then we passed with a lamppost coming in front of us. It separated us from the model, and it didn't go crazy and start to pulse and look for focus. It picked her right back up on the other side of that lamppost and kept going and didn't skip a beat in the focus at all. And so it definitely has improved. Big change. And what I find interesting is even the further away that the model would go, it would track her head. Even when I was expecting it to jump to body, it was still tracking her head and her face way further out than I was thinking that it would switch to body. So they definitely have fine-tuned it for sure.
Excellent. And another question that came in, which I don't know. So the ProRes RAW update isn't out yet, right? That's coming later on.
No, it's not. And it's more of a RAW than I would say the Apple ProRes RAW. I would say it's a RAW out on this camera.
Okay. And do you feel like, have you gotten a chance to test that or shoot that yet, or not yet, or can't talk about it?
I can't
say anything.
Confirm or talk. So
yeah, I get that. So that will be to be continued. Hopefully we can do a follow-up question on that one. Knowing Panasonic, it's going to be, it's going to be great quality. And what I like about Panasonic is how well the different cameras match their footage so well. Especially, I mean, you can have a GH5 with an S1 and S1H, and they're all in Vlog, and they're going to look similar, and it's going to be easy, to get that grade down. Now, you might have more stops of dynamic range, so it's not going to be exact, but I feel like they do a really good job of supporting the filmmaker in that way.
And one thing I'm going to mention too, with just this camera itself, I put this camera through the paces over the past few months that I've had it. And so I've used it as primary camera. In fact, everything that I shot for the launch video content that I made for the camera, everything was shot on the S5. So it's been on a Ronin S. It's been suspended out of the back of a truck when I was filming some TV spots for a car commercial. I've gone XLR mic through an adapter into it with a 3.5. I've shot it with a Ninja 5 recorder attached using the HDMI out. I mean, I have put this through the test and treated it like it was an S1H, if you will, and it's kept up with it. And one of the points that people were asking me on a different call that I was on was about the overheating side of things. And one of the videos that I shot for the promos, I'm in Texas, so it was the summer outside in a warehouse. It was about 98 degrees outside, no air conditioning. It was a metal warehouse, no air conditioning, and it was for glass blowing place. And so we had 3 different glass ovens in there at 2,000 degrees each. And I shot for about 3 hours in there and did not have to turn the camera off and do a cool down period at all. And I was pushing 422 10-bit 60 to a Ninja recorder for a lot of that with no issues.
That's great. Yeah, and that's what I love about Panasonic is they're always conservative with their numbers because they want it to work properly, and the weather sealing and the temperature control is just second to none. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Question here that came in, and you may or may not know this because you might not have put other lenses or APS-C stuff on there. Does it switch to a crop mode when APS-C lenses are connected? Do you know that?
I've not tried that, so I can't answer that. I'm assuming that it would make sense that it would do that. I've not tested that.
Okay. And then Cliff, if you're you're obviously watching, shoot me an email at social@thepixelconnection.com. I have the camera here, and I'm pretty sure I have an MC21. So the 18 to 35 that you're asking about, I'll do a hands-on test, and I'll answer that for you and make sure. Cool.
And you mentioned the MC21, that made me think of obviously the Sigma lenses. It's been really fun to play with the Sigma lenses with this camera as well. In fact, we just did an event here, and I was shooting with the 85 for the majority of that event, and it was great to shoot with that as well.
Yeah, we had that 85 a couple weeks ago, and just the smallness, the 45 too, is just awesome. I mean, just the quality and the size.
That 45 is a really interesting lens. It really is interesting. Have you played with it yet yourself?
Yep.
You have?
Yep.
So did you notice that it has a little bit, almost a retro vintagey vibe to the color that it does on the image itself? It changes it up some. It's kind of funky. Yeah,
I really like it. And that's one that it was a sad day to send that back to Panasonic when I worked there. But it's such a great little lens that especially for the price and the size, I feel like it pairs really well with this camera. And one thing too I wanted to talk a little bit about is this 20 to 60. So if you haven't watched on our YouTube channel, not you, but the audience, we do have a video all about just the 20 to 60. Thank you for Panasonic for getting that in our hands when it first came out. But just the size of this lens, it's a nice small compact zoom, and that 20 to 60, I feel like that's a really good focal length. Like a good in between. It's not, like a 24 to 70. I'd rather have a little bit more on that wide end. So have you shot with that lens at all? And if so, what are your thoughts?
I have. It actually, sits on my camera for the most part, which is right here. And I love that lens. It is so sharp, and it's just such a joy to work with. And it's easy to carry around. It's lightweight. I love it also for vlogging. It's great to just pop a Gorilla Pod on the bottom of the camera. That 20 is just the perfect focal length for vlogging. And so that's my go-to vlogging lens for this camera. And then just my general run around shooting, 3.5 to 5.6 on that doesn't even phase me a bit. If I feel like I need an extra little bit of bokeh, if you will, in the background, and just pull my subject further away from the background and call it good. I mean, I've not skipped a beat with using this for like street shooting and things.
Right. I feel like it's a really versatile focal length for sure.
And a lot of the content that I've shot for the launch stuff, photos and all, I shot with that particular lens just to really give a good, well-rounded view of what you can do with that kit lens, with that package. And it was great. Loved it.
And now I want to transition a little bit. We've been talking a ton about video. So tell us a little bit about, stills performance, how are the files coming out of this? Are there certain modes or certain, when you're shooting, certain things you like about the S5 for still shooting?
To me, it's like shooting with an S1. I mean, I'm getting the 24 megapixels raw images that are coming out that are just great color science. They're fantastic. The autofocus, obviously, when I'm doing continuous autofocus with this in stills, I'm reaping the benefits of the updates to the autofocus with that. So that's working perfectly. This is a small thing that I like about this camera, and you can do it with the S1H, but you don't really shoot a lot of stills with the S1H. So I like, this is a weird probably quirk for me, because a lot of times when I'm shooting, I have my camera up to my face, and the little toggle joystick thing back here can be a little bit small sometimes, and just for me cumbersome to get around with in my style of shooting. I love the fact that in this camera I can set the touch screen on the back to have an offset to the right active. So what that means is when I'm having my camera up, my thumb can move on the right side of this touch screen, and it moves my focus point all across my frame, and I can control my focus point with my thumb, which means in video, rack focusing for me becomes super easy because I can have my thumb sitting on like my model's face, and maybe I want to switch and put her out of focus. I just slide my thumb over to the object behind it, and it just pops the focus right over there. So I love that feature for both photo and video for the way that I shoot. Outside of that, this really is like shooting an S1. It really is.
Absolutely. That's also how I always shot with it. And just, having your, when you're shooting, just having that thumb right there, I feel like it's so much quicker, even like brides coming down the aisle, or like with a dancer having to move super quick. I feel like this is so much faster than using the joystick.
I agree.
And trying to move your box around. It's just, to me, a lot quicker. And also what I like just ergonomically about the camera is when you're doing that, so as soon as it lights up, you can spin your wheel to make it larger. So let's say something is, all of a sudden, coming closer, you can just rack that up, even larger, and just the autofocus, that little box, it's just really easy to use. And that's what, it's hard to explain some of these things to people that are, the features that are built in, but you just have to try it. You definitely have to get it in your hands. For me, like this is a home run from Panasonic. It's the right size, it's the right specs.
Really,
I mean, it's a great little camera.
And it's fun to shoot with, and that's one of the things I love is it's fun. I normally wouldn't go out and shoot like astrophotography and things like that, but with the live view composite, that's one of the things that they asked me to go do is to do that. And I've never shot long exposure astrophotography at all. And it was so easy to do that with this camera using the live view composite mode. And I loved being able to watch that image just build real time on the back of the screen. So whenever I had the right amount of star trails, I just hit the stop button and I was done and finished. And it was great to be able to do that. And that was fun. That goes back into that little grouping of those creative modes that I've been referring to. So I lumped the live view compositing, the S&Q mode, and even the high resolution picture mode. I lump that into these creative modes. You don't use them all the time, but they're there and they're fun to work with. They really are.
Absolutely. And for anybody that doesn't know, let's talk about those modes really quick. So high res mode, what exactly is the high res mode?
So the high res mode will let you capture a 96 megapixel image out of this camera. It basically takes 8 images and stitches them together and gives you a 96 megapixel image. And it's super, super big and super clear and sharp. I did some images of the 360 bridge here in Austin, and I was talking whenever I shot him. Matt Frazier and I were talking. He's one of the guys over at Lumix, and he loved the fact that we could zoom in on that image and get all the way down to the seams and see the rivets on the seam of the bridge, and they were tack sharp. And so it's just cool to have that definition and clarity in that image. And I shot it across from a cliff space across the way from it, and then shot into it. And it was really cool.
And that's what's cool. I mean, you have the, around 20 megapixel, 24 megapixel when you need it. But then if you want larger files, it's not like you have to reach for the S1R. You can just pop it into that mode and get that. So you're not, and one thing I, don't like about any of the high res cameras really, like to try to shoot a wedding. Like there's sometimes where I want that high res photo, but if I'm taking that camera, I either have to have a totally separate body or I'm shooting the whole wedding at 40 plus megapixels, and that's hell on the editing system. So with this, whenever I need that high res, just turn that on, get that nice high res shot, and then back to the 24 or like with a G920, megapixel photos. I just think that it's like the Swiss Army knife of cameras.
It is. And when you're shooting like in that high res mode, you've got 2 different modes of how it does the images. You've got mode 1 and mode 2 on that. Mode 1, basically, if you have something that moves in the image, you're going to get a little bit of a blur. Like when I shot it with the bridge, there were cars going across the bridge. And so you'd see some of that motion of the cars going by. But you put it in mode 2, and it takes one of the images, and that basically with things that are moving, it takes that image and it becomes your reference, if you will. And so it stops, and it caught a shot where there was just like one car on the bridge moving, and then there were some boats down below in the river. It took that reference image of like the boats in one position. So I didn't get this movement in those 8 images of the boats shifting, and it just froze and took a reference image. And so I really encourage people that use that to use that mode 2 when you're shooting in that particular feature.
Absolutely. And then the other one you said, it was like a live composite mode. So explain a little bit about that. Yep,
so we all know, people have seen those fancy star trail images. And like I said, I've not really ever shot those, but my understanding of how those are done in the past is you would set up your camera, you would pick your exposure, and you would say, okay, it's going to take 2 hours to get me the image that I'm after. So you do your shot, wait for the 2 hours, and then you'd get to see if you got it right and if the image was correct. And the thought of that has always made me a little bit nervous and made me shy away from doing astrophotography. But with the live view composite mode, like I mentioned, it's just great to see the image build on the back of the camera. So whether I was shooting star trails or I was shooting traffic at night in downtown Austin, or there was a piece of the glass blowing studio where I was shooting where they were adding color and they were moving back and forth with the glass itself that was on fire. And it was just cool to be able to sit there and set that up and just watch that image build. And like I said, when I was talking about it previously, once I saw the amount of blur or the amount of car headlights or the trail moving through the sky of the stars, once I got to the point of what I wanted, I could just stop and then I'm done. And so there was a time where I shot my star trails and I did it for 30 minutes, not 2 hours, did it for 30 minutes, and I was happy with my result, stopped the image processing, and there we are. I was done. And so the live view composite just lets you watch in real time.
It is. And I think I haven't really got a chance to play with it very much, but I've seen what some of the people have done with it. Sean also works at Panasonic. He's been posting some images over on Instagram, using that. And it allows you to see things that you normally wouldn't be able to even see in the night sky. Like he's even been getting some star stuff in Austin, which even with the city lights, he's been able to create some pretty epic stuff. So again, phenomenal camera. So some parting thoughts as we're closing here, and anybody that's out there that has some questions, please reach out to us. Put them in the chat. I want to make sure that we get those answered for you. What is the one feature in this camera that has surprised you, or what has drawn you to this camera more than any other camera that you've shot with?
I'm going to go back to my comment. I'm going to combine a couple things to do this. For me, it's just the fact that for what I do and for a lot of what I shoot, it's the perfect hybrid camera for my content creation. It's small, it's lightweight, but yet I don't sacrifice on the video features that I need, and I get amazing stills that come out of the camera. And I love that articulating screen. And that for me is like the perfect package for a lot of the content that I produce.
Excellent. So as we close out here, where can people find you online and see some of your work?
So probably the best, there's a couple places. Instagram, obviously I'm really active on Instagram. So if people want to just go to @ToddWhite, and it's just @ToddWhite, no underscores or anything. And then also you can go to my website, just toddwhite.org. Those are 2 options there that people can go and see. But I'm very active on Instagram, and there's a link out there on my profile for Instagram that goes to my fashion portfolio, which has more of my up-to-date fashion and commercial work is out there.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for taking time today. Really appreciate it, and thank you, Panasonic, for sending us the camera ahead of time. If you are local to us here in the Cleveland, Ohio area, please come out on Friday. Spoiler alert: you can also come out tomorrow. Like, we have the camera, so we'll let you play with it. But Friday is the event in which we are going to have it out on the counter with all the different lenses. We have several different L-mount lenses available for you to try out on the camera. And again, if you have absolutely any questions, let us know. You can give us a call at the store. You can find us on Instagram at the.pixelconnection, or shoot us an email, social@thepixelconnection.com. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and have a great week. We'll see you.